What's up, amazings? It's Justin from Furiously Amazing. I hope you are well. So, in the previous episode of WandaVision, we left off with Wanda expanding the borders of her hex dimension, sucking in the sword base and a number of other individuals. And this week, we follow up with Wanda basically waking up in the aftermath of what just happened. She obviously hasn't gotten much sleep since she's still in the leotards of her costume from Halloween night. And so when Wanda wakes up, she's very overwhelmed, it would seem. She wakes up and she's trying to cope with basically what she's just done and what's going on. You know, she reaches over for Vision when she wakes up. And she's just really kind of just frustrated. She's obviously going through a lot of mental fatigue right now, probably physical fatigue from having to keep the hex dimension stable. And now, since it's been expanded, this is obviously draining her a lot more and probably fatiguing her in ways that are physical and emotional, and with the mental pain. And so in the beginning of this episode, as she's home, we begin to see that a number of objects around the house are starting to glitch back into their forms from, the past. We see this with the boys' console as they're playing first with what is a game, Nintendo Wii, it appears to be, and then their controllers turn into a Nintendo GameCube controller, and then they turn into the Atari controller. I believe it's the Atari 2600. Probably got the number wrong on that, but and then it glitches into Uno cards. So it just keeps going back in time. And the boys are, they come upstairs and they tell their mom, stuff is going on, blah, blah, blah. Our games is messing up. But Wanda can't be bothered. She doesn't want to be bothered. And this is an obvious sign that she's coming to the point where her ability to remain mentally stable is obviously deteriorating and falling apart. And what I think is going on here is a big foreshadowing of what's about to happen, because I believe that there are, there's a high possibility that as we know, this series is setting up for Doctor Strange's multiverse of madness. And what I think will probably happen is that the madness is linked to, of course, Wanda's mental instability, because even as she continues talking with the boys, at one point she even tells them, I'm starting to think that everything is meaningless. And as she's talking to the camera, she says, I might have went too far, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, she's obviously very mentally and emotionally unstable. And as we can see, the world is starting to break down is a reflection of Wanda's mental state just breaking down, and eventually it's going to deteriorate, I believe, into madness. Now there was a bit of foreshadowing in this episode. There were two instances of foreshadowing in the house, in Wanda's house. When she comes downstairs and she makes some cereal, she grabs a box of sugar snaps, and she also grabs a carton of milk to put in her cereal. And as she's pouring the milk, we see a missing child picture on the milk carton, obviously foreshadowing what happens later in the episode, where her children are taken by Agnes, who we now know as Agatha Harkness. But there was also another foreshadowing of this same event, where later on in the house, as the house and the furniture and things are glitching in different time periods, we see that the stork shows up again. The same stork from the pregnancy episode, which she couldn't make disappear with her powers. We see that stork again, and this is, I believe, a foreshadowing saying, the kids, the stork is coming to get the kids, rather than traditionally a stork would deliver the kids, but this is more of a diabolical stork. So then we switch to the scene of Hayward's team preparing to basically launch into the hex. Now, I think that there's some interesting stuff here, because for one, what I'm thinking is we have to think about how they are actually going to enter into the hex. Now, as far as we know, and as we find out from a later scene with Monica, is that the hex is now in a defensive state. So it's not trying to allow anyone or anything to enter into the hex. It's forcefully repelling any and everything from entering. And this, of course, is a reflective of Wanda's state. She's over it with Sword and with everyone at this point. She doesn't want anything else interfering with her at this point. And so I believe that there are a few options for this, maybe a couple of options, but I believe that one, Wanda's mental state will change in such a way that she's no longer able to maintain the boundaries of the hex, and it starts just sucking things in, and they get sucked into the hex. That's one option. Option two is that the hex is absolutely destroyed. I believe that this is a possibility, seeing that, as we know from the end of the episode, Wanda is obviously in incredible danger with Agatha, as she seems to be put under the spell of Agatha's magic, with her eyes turning purple, as if Agatha is pitting her under her hex now, or her spell magic, or whatever is going on there. So this, I believe, is probably a setup to what's about to happen, because from what we know, there's really no way for the Sword agents to get into the hex dimension at this point, besides their wishful thinking. So, okay, then we transfer to the scene and a couple of scenes with Vision and Darcy. And I'm not going to dive too deep into these, because I didn't really notice a lot in these scenes between Darcy and Vision, besides the fact that I just love the character of Dr. Darcy at this point. What do you guys and gals all think of Darcy? Personally, I love her. I think she adds a very enjoyable dimension to the show. Her and Wu add just so much flavor and personality to the show. So I've definitely been enjoying them so far. And one thing I've been really, I guess this is just my personal desire, but I've been feeling like Darcy could have a bigger role or a bigger part to play in all of this. I feel like she could be more well utilized, and I don't believe she was introduced just for this series alone. So I think, and especially where it seems that the MCU is moving now, trying to move more into promoting female characters and diverse characters, I believe Darcy could probably be a setup for possibly a mutant now that she's entered the hex dimension. So I don't know what you all think about that, but let me know. Would you like to see Darcy and more throughout the MCU, or do you think we've had enough Darcy? Let me know down in the comments. Okay, so we go back to Wanda's house, and at this point, Wanda, she's sitting on the couch with the boys, and she just needs some me time. She needs some alone time. And so, would you know, just when what she wants is, needs some help, guess who shows up? Agnes again. So Wanda opens the door with her magic. At this point, she's not trying to hide anything. She's coming clean about everything. She's over it at this point. She doesn't care about anything. So she opens the door. Agnes comes in. She does her scene. Basically says, hey, I can take the boys, blah, 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 blah. Which we all know, or all knew all this time, she wanted the boys. She wanted the kids. For what reason is yet to be revealed. There are a lot of theories out there about Mephisto, about her wanting them to suck their life energy. I've just begun to think that another possible theory is that, or idea that I have, is that Agatha could possibly be wanting the life force of these children in order to preserve her youthful appearance. Because we don't know yet if this is just the appearance she took on after entering Wanda's hex, or if this is appearance she's been able to maintain for a number of years based on her own magic. Because as far as we know, and what we know from the character of Agatha Harkness in the comics, is that she was very, very old, centuries old. So it could be something along those lines. And there are a couple of other theories I have, but we'll talk about them a little later when we get to Agatha's house and when we get to So Also, as the house begins to glitch and deteriorate, we see the furniture going wild again. Like I mentioned earlier, we saw the stork showing up again. And this leads us right into the Nexus commercial, our weekly Wanda commercial. And this commercial was basically a drug commercial. You know, your standard drug commercial. It'll help you with this, it'll help you with that, but side effects may include, you know, all of these terrible things. And I think this is obviously a huge setup for a number of things, because it could be saying a few things. One is that Wanda's hex dimension has become like a nexus. Now, we know from the comics that the nexus to all dimensions was a gateway basically to enter into any other possible reality. And I think that Wanda in what the show is setting up is that basically Wanda is going to be the bridge into the multiverse, really on a whole new scale in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So we definitely have a setup for that. And it just kind of just shows how, her reality is breaking down, and how that she can't control things anymore, regardless of how much of this false reality or this nexus she's created is. It can't really hold it together because the world doesn't revolve around her, or does it? So a little bit later, we get the boys at Agatha's house. Now, there were a number of things in this scene which I found very interesting, and the first of which is obviously Mr. Scratch, or Senior Scratch, as Agnes calls the bunny or the rabbit. Now, you tell me if it's a bunny or a rabbit. I know there's a difference, right? Or a bunny or a rabbit or hare or whatever. Let me know in the comments. But what I think is really interesting is that we obviously have this weird usage of animals regarding Agnes. You know, there was the stork, then there was this rabbit, then there was later on in the show there was a cicada, I believe it was, on the wall. And there's just been a lot of this, you know, these animals. And of course we know that animals are connected with, you know, magical creatures from, you know, that witches use for a variety of purposes. Either someone has been turned into an animal, or an animal kind of works as a vessel to kind of spy on people. And this was one thing that came to mind when Agnes is talking with Billy. Billy, you know, she says, penny for your thoughts. And Billy says, you know, I like it here because it's, first Agnes says, you do like it here because, you know, Mr. Scratch is such a good listener. And when she said that, it had me thinking, has Agnes been using animals as a way of kind of spying on Wanda and on her world? Because, you know, every time Wanda needs something, Agnes seems to show up. So are these animals being used as vessels of kind of listening? Was the stork planted in her house as kind of like an ear or eye or something to spy on Agnes? Just something to think about, and something that got me thinking. And also, I'm also thinking that this rabbit may play some sort of bigger role. Is this rabbit Mephisto? Is it Ralph? Is it, you know, is it somehow a creature that Agatha is trying to restore to its human form? You know, because it just seemed very weird that at the end of the episode, when we see Agnes reveal herself as being Agatha Harkness, that she comes down to the basement with the rabbit in her hand, petting it as if she's, you know, basically channeling some sort of power from it or something like that. So it just seemed very peculiar and extremely telling. So there's definitely something there with the rabbit. Now, there was also Billy's comment about saying that he liked Agatha's house because it was quiet. And then he says that you're quiet, Agnes, on the inside. And so this was incredibly disturbing visually, at least to Agnes. She looks around shocked. And then when Tommy says, you know, you think, well, will our mom be okay? You know, she turns around scared too. And so I think that this could be a reveal of Agatha's darker side, that she, you know, I know some people have been saying she doesn't have a soul. Or could it be that Agnes has somehow been concealing her thoughts and her intentions and things like that from Wanda and from the, of course, from the children? Has she somehow put a veil over herself in order to keep her thoughts? Because as we know, Wanda is to an extent a telepath. So I believe that is also a possibility. Okay, so moving on, we have Monica versus the Hex. So of course, you know, our favorite Monica Rambeau is attempting to get into the Hex. Her team of what it seems to be individuals who work at SWORD but were loyal to her mother and are still loyal to her, and are, I guess, are not on board with what's going on with Hayward, which is really interesting because we may see this move along a little further down the line, where you have people inside of SWORD working against SWORD itself and coming alongside and helping people like Monica or the mutants, or, you know, whatever's being set up here, helping our heroes. I think that there could be some stuff there. But anyway, I don't know if it was for sure this lady who shows up, the major, I forget her name, but I don't know if she's the aerospace engineer or if she was just someone who was bringing the vehicle, and they'll reveal the aerospace engineer at a later day. Let me know your thoughts about that in the comments. I wasn't too sure about that. But anyway, we see them showing up basically with this Moonwalker vehicle. And I just personally laughed because I'm like, there's no way this thing is gonna get into the Hex. Like, you're dreaming. Like, what makes you think that this thing is going to be capable of penetrating this you know, this force field or whatever? But anyway, they try it. Monica gets in the vehicle. She speeds towards the Hex, and as soon as she hits it, she realizes that this truck ain't going nowhere. It ain't working. It's not happening. But as she continues pushing, trying to force her way into the Hex, it begins to start to rewrite the code of the spacewalker vehicle. And so as it begins to be rewritten, Monica, you know, she unstraps herself and she gets the heck out of there. And as soon as she leaves the vehicle is rejected by the Hex. And this is what I believe was the explanation for what was going on, is that because Monica was in the vehicle, the code of the vehicle began to be rewritten, or in other words, because Monica has already been inside of the Hex, it somehow recognizes her because she's to some extent a part of it. And so it was beginning to accept Monica, but when she got out of the vehicle, it's rejected. And this is why I believe Monica said, I can get in. She knew she had a way in, because I was wondering, I was like, how does she know she can get in? But then I thought about saying, okay, this makes sense. She's been in there before. And plus, as we discovered just a little, her powers are beginning to manifest. So she somehow recognizes the energy of the Hex dimension. And this is, of course, one of Monica Rambeau's powers from the comics is energy duplication, where if she has enough time to observe any form of energy, she can change herself into it, or she can reproduce it to use it herself. And so obviously she's been in and out of the Hex already, and she's acquired these powers, so she can phase herself basically to in a sense merge herself with this energy force and get her way into the Hex. And so, of course, as she's going through the Hex, you know, she begins forcing herself in. We have this call back to these memories from some lines from Captain Marvel, some other lines from Monica's childhood. This foreshadowing line where she asks, can she fly up to her mom, or can she come up to her mom? Her mom says, maybe if you learn how to fly like your Auntie Carol, which is, of course, another foreshadowing of the power she's about to receive right now. And she's able to hold her thoughts together to resist Wanda's mind control and force her way into Wanda's dimension, and her eyes begin glowing blue. And we have now created Photon or Spectrum or the other Captain Marvel, whatever they're going to call her at this point. And it was such a payoff moment. Everybody was waiting for it, and I think it was great. I think Monica Rambeau is a fantastic character thus far. I'm very interested to see where they go with her from here. But she looks up and she looks at we get this scene of the power lines, and we see Monica seeing the energy that's flowing through these power lines, which is what we were just talking about. One of her powers from the comics, she's able to identify and see energy forces, and she is aware of the energy around her. So that was awesome. Okay, and so we see Monica run into the house of Wanda, of course, tries to tell her about Hayward's plan. Just Wanda's already ticked. She doesn't want Monica around at all. She says, don't tell me about that. I don't want to hear about it. She uses her powers to levitate Monica basically out of the house. And we see all of the residents of Westview standing around looking just kind of frozen, just, observing this whole thing, which was interesting to me. Not sure if there's more to that or not, but it also may be a reveal that Wanda was already aware of Hayward's plans, and this may have actually motivated her to take the Vision's body. This may have actually been why, or part of the reason why, she took Vision's body. And as we discussed in one of our previous discussions, when she comes out of the hex and confronts the sword agent, she says, I have what I want and no one's going to take it from me again. She looks directly at Hayward when she says no one's going to take it from me again. So I'm thinking that it's possible that Wanda was very upset at what they were doing with Vision's body and actually controlled herself from probably inflicting harm or worse to these people who were doing this to her husband's body against his will. So also we see Monica empathizing with Wanda, saying, I've lost someone too. I know how you feel, but I can't change my truth. It's just what it is. And, basically saying, you have to learn how to just accept this. It's painful. Yeah, but this is your reality now, basically. And I just love Monica for that. She's such a compassionate, merciful character, but yet she's strong and integral. So I just love that. And so we see that this obviously ticks off Agatha, who is very close and sees Monica out of her window, comes outside and basically says, you need to leave now, child. This is, blah, blah, blah. Takes Wanda into her house and brings her in. So once Wanda gets to Agatha's house, this is when a lot of the weirdness starts. Wanda, first she looks at the TV, then she notices Mr. Scratch, the rabbit, and then she looks on the wall and notices the bug, and she just knows that there's an eeriness. She looks on the table and she sees that the boys, food is there, but they're not there. And so of course she thinks, we're the boys. And Agatha says, oh, they're probably, or Agnes at this point, she says they're probably playing in the basement. And so Wanda goes down into the basement looking for her boys, and this is when we get the big reveal of just her basement looking like this dungeon, like this witch's sanctuary. And we obviously at this point know what's going on. This is not Agnes, this is Agatha Harkness. And we get a shot of this object, which a lot of people are calling a book. A lot of people are saying it's the Book of Sins, or the what is the other name for it? Starts with a D. I was just looking into it, but me personally, I don't think that it's a book. Just because the more time I spent looking at it, it had orange energy glowing from it. But to me, just me personally, I might be totally wrong, but to me, it didn't look like a book. It looked more like a talisman or a relic. Firstly, the material of it didn't seem to be like a parchment or like something that would be a book. It seemed incredibly small for a book. And it just seemed to me more to be something like an object, a magic object, which she's using either to protect herself from Wanda's magic or using it for some other purposes. But to me, it just didn't seem like a book, but maybe it is. Let me know you all thoughts in the comments. What do you think it is? I just the more I looked at it, I'm like, I don't really think that it's a book. It just didn't look like that to me. And then of course we have the big reveal of Agnes. She comes down and says, well, do you think you were the only magic lady in town? Yada, yada, yada. And she waves, her eyes start glowing, and she puts basically, from what it appears, she puts Wanda under her spell, under her magic. So Then we go into this montage of Agnes reveals herself saying, I'm Agatha Harkness, nice to meet you. And we go into this montage of all the previous episodes where Agatha was actually at work behind the scenes. Now we're going to do a video about this, which we'll release either tomorrow or the day after, talking about all the times that were revealed that Agatha was behind the scenes, and all the times that we think that Agatha was probably behind the scenes. So stay tuned for that, and be sure to subscribe to the channel so you can not miss that video. But anyway, then there leads us to the last scene, which was the mid-credit scene, where we have Monica going up to the house of Agatha and not being able to get into the door, so going to the basement door and opening the basement door. And what we see is her looking down into the stairs, and on the side of the stairs on the wall we see like these vines or something that have this type of energy flowing through them, which obviously or apparently Monica is able to recognize. Now this got me really thinking. There are a couple of things about this. We're going to get into the whole Pietro showing up in just a little, but it got me thinking, if Monica is able to recognize Agnes's energy or Agatha's energy, this is very interesting because, for one, as we know from the comics, Monica is able to duplicate people's energy, and she's able to recreate it. She's able to phase into it herself. She's able to become that energy and utilize that energy. So this is very, very interesting because it just has me wondering, will this somehow play into the whole calamity that's happening? Will she have a bigger part to play in this? It's just really interesting. It also got me thinking, perhaps Agnes is not summoning this energy from out of the universe or from somewhere, but it's actually coming from within the universe. It's just got me thinking, because I'm just thinking, will this be, will Monica somehow act as like an amplifier to the whole Hex situation, where it really explodes out of control, or something to that extent that kind of warrants the notice of Doctor Strange or something like that. But anyway, it also so then later we see Pietro, a little right after that we see Pietro show up next to, or Quicksilver show up right next to Monica, saying Snoop's going to snoop, and this is just really funny. But also it just got me thinking, because as we saw from the Agatha montage, that Quicksilver, or this version of Quicksilver, was under the control of Agatha most or all of the time we saw him in the series so far. So is this Quicksilver still his own person? If she had to control him, that means he's not like some sort of demonic entity. At least it seems to me he's not some sort of demonic entity like Mephisto or something that's disguising himself as Quicksilver. Perhaps he really was summoned from, I don't know, from the dead or from an alternate dimension or whatever, by Agatha, and she put him under her control. So that's really interesting, because does that mean that Quicksilver will join in the fight against Agatha, or is he still being puppeteered by Agnes? Or maybe it's a mixture of both. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'm excited about that. They're obviously going to have to help Wanda get free. And yeah, so I think that this is a setup. This is a really good setup. It's about to be a very exciting battle, a very exciting final 2 episodes. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm really excited about where the MCU is going from here. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. What do you think is going on, and what did I miss? Let us know in the comments. So until then, keep being amazing, keep being furiously amazing, and I will see you in the next one. Peace, y'all.